All right, folks, for this assignment, we're going to continue with the idea of drawing from life and drawing still lives. We are moving away from the process of drawing specifically with just positive and negative space. Now we're getting into this idea of drawing objects that are in front of you in a way that is realistic and showing that three-dimensionality and form. So with all of the assignments that you've worked on up to this point, it's always been we start off super simple, and then as that simplicity, as you complete one assignment, the next assignment gets a little bit harder, and the next assignment gets a little harder, so that you're able to deal with your skills and build upon your skills. So everybody, no matter where you sit in the room, in the center of the ring, you have your first geometric still life of the two cylinders that are right next to each other. Your job is going to be drawing a picture of what you see based on your point of view in the room when you're looking forward. Now, everything that you're going to be doing today for this project, it really comes directly back to what you learned during the negative space still life, looking at the shapes, looking at the empty spaces around to be able to build up your drawing. It comes back to that sense of plumbing, visually measuring the size of different objects so that you're able to stack things up on top. Those are two things that you are going to continue with on this particular drawing. Now we're throwing in the idea of a full range of values and a light source in the still life, so that you're really capturing the sense of depth and the sense of space of where these objects are sitting. So depending on where you are sitting and looking at the still life in front of you, there's three things that you're going to be paying attention to. The first one is your sense of a highlight. The highlight is the section on the shapes that are the brightest areas, the sections on the shapes where you can tell that the light is shining directly onto the shapes, just a hard striking light. It's the highlights that give you the idea of the direction that the light is coming from. So in this picture that I'm projecting here, you can tell that that light source is coming directly from the right, because when you look at this, the brightest area of this cylinder is right on the right-hand side. The brightest area of this cylinder is also on the right-hand side. The other tool that you've got, the other cue that you have to know where the light is coming from, is the cast shadow. The cast shadow is the darkest area, the place on the cylinders, or the place on the objects where there is no light shining down on it. So the highlight and the cast shadow are always going to be opposite to each other. So if you've got your highlight on this side, notice over on this side of this cylinder, this is the darkest area right in here. If this is the lightest area of this cylinder, you've got the darkest area coming in over on this side. You've also got the cast shadows down underneath, the shadows that are being placed onto the surface that the objects are laying on. These are the two of the most important things that you've got to be able to tell, and you've got to be able to map out on your piece and shade in a way that is realistic based upon the view that you have from where you're looking. Third thing that you need to look for is your core shadows. And the core shadows are the areas on the objects where you've got that medium middle gray. The core shadows are probably your most important thing that you're going to be paying attention to, because with those core shadows, if you look at your highlight and you look at that gradient value that comes across, getting into the core shadow to the cast shadow, what you're going to see is in the core shadows, that's where you get the most variation of your light. So with these spotlights hitting the white sheet and with these spotlights hitting these white objects, the first thing that if you really look at your view and you really look at the objects sitting up in front of you, you are going to see real subtle gradient value differences of where it goes from dark down to just a lighter tone back to a dark tone. I'm talking about this section right in here. I'm talking about this section right in here. These are areas where the light is hitting the white sheet and the white cylinders, and the light is reflecting back. So that light reflection in those core values, those are where you're going to find the most subtlety in your shading. And the better you can capture that subtlety with your pencils by using your real small circular shading, by going in and really paying attention to your layering and how you shade this, this is how you're going to get that sense of subtlety and three-dimensionality and realism in your piece. So, that being said, let's talk about the process of actually drawing a cylinder first. So, in this drawing, or in this photograph, the very, very first thing that you're going to do is you're going to pay attention to your positive and negative space of where the negative space ends up meeting the table that your object is sitting on. When you go in and you shade this, all of your negative space is going to be shaded in black. You want to have that black negative space back in the back because that's going to give you contrast between your background, middle ground, and foreground. It's also going to create the back edge of the surface that your objects are sitting on. With still lifes, if you don't include that back edge of the table, if you don't include the surface that the objects are sitting on, your objects are just going to be sitting in space, and that will and I mean like outer space. They're just going to be floating. They're going to be floating in nothingness. And with your objects floating in nothingness, you're not going to have that background, middle ground, and foreground, which means you're not going to create that sense of space in your drawing. You've got to have that sense of space. It's the shading that goes in that gives you that 3D illusion of three-dimensional form. So now we're taking all of your shading and we're taking that background, middle ground, foreground idea, and you're putting it down to really capture that sense of space in itself. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at, all right, so if the back edge of my table comes straight across like this, so using a 2H, maybe a B or a 2B pencil, but very, very lightly, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to draw that back horizon line, that back edge of where the table is. I'm just going to lightly mark this in. Now, the next thing that I'm going to pay attention to is where on my view does the largest cylinder come in and intersect with that back edge of this table. So, in other words, I'm coming in and I'm looking at the negative space coming around. So if I know that this comes up like this, I would say that right about here is where the edge, that right edge of the cylinder is going to come out. Here over on this side is about where my left edge of the cylinder is going to hit. Now, with drawing cylinders, most students, the first time that they draw a cylinder, they go in and they do something like this. They're like, okay, I know that this cylinder is round up on the top, so what am I going to do? I'm going to draw a circle. So here's the top of my cylinder. I know that it's got a side, it comes down like this, it comes down like this, and I know the bottom of my cylinder is round, so I'm going to draw another circle like this. And then they walk up and they go, Mr. Teague, this doesn't look like this. I know my cylinder is round at the top and the bottom, and then it comes down on the sides, but why doesn't this look like the cylinder that's in front? It's because it's all about that placement and proportion. Even though you know that this top area is round right in here, from your view, it's not going to look round. The only way that you're going to get that round view is if you are looking down from the top on this. Instead, the opening of your cylinder is going to be more like the shape of an ellipse. And an ellipse is basically a circle that looks like it's been sat on by an elephant, and it's nice and flattened out. You want the edges of your cylinder, or the edges of your ellipse on the left and the right to come through and to be a little bit more narrow than it is in the middle. If you look at this, you can see that it's narrower here on the sides and larger in the middle. Then you draw your lines coming straight down from the side. Lines coming straight down from the side. And then when you get to your base, when you get to the base of your cylinder, you want the base of that cylinder to have a slight curvature to it. Placement and proportion, right? The farther away something gets from you, the smaller it's going to appear. The farther away something gets from you, the further back in the picture plane it's going to get. So this side of the cylinder and this side of the cylinder are farther away, which means it's going to have a slight curvature to it. So when I look at this, I'm going to say that this is the bottom base of my cylinder that comes in like this. If this is my bottom base, that means that the back edge is going to curve ever so slightly, coming back to those curved edges back in the back. Draw very lightly. First time you do this, chances are your lines aren't going to be exactly right, and that's totally fine. I'm not looking for perfection the first time around. Just make sure that you're drawing it light enough that if you do mess up, that you are going to be able to erase your piece. Now, for the cylinder back in the back, the next thing that you want to look at is where does the bottom of this cylinder intersect with this larger cylinder in the front? Where does the top edge of this cylinder intersect with this piece? So this is where you can use your plumbing or some sort of visual cue to just stop and look at, okay, look, if my corner is right here, I know that that back edge is going to come up just a little bit at this angle. If I'm looking at my top edge, here is about halfway down on the cylinder itself. So if I'm looking at this, the top edge of that cylinder is at about the halfway mark. So I'm going to come in and really, what am I doing? I'm just making sure that this cylinder that's laying on the side is the size is proportionate to what I have for the large cylinder here. You don't want to have a small cylinder on the front and a giant cylinder over here because you're not paying attention and you're just going in listening to your brain, having your brain tell you, these are how cylinders are put in. Now, once I know that this comes in like this and this comes in like this, you're going to come in and you're going to extend this down until you look at the bottom edge of this opening. If you look at the bottom edge of this opening right here and you draw a straight line across, how much farther down from this edge does this go? So I'm looking at this and it's just a little bit. It's just a little bit farther down. So I'm going to lightly draw a little line at the base that comes all the way across. I'm going to extend this down like so. And now I know that my opening to this cylinder is going to be at about this point right here. So now I'm going to come in and from my view, this shape is more like an oval. I'm able to see more of this opening because of the position of where this picture was taken. So I'm not going to do a super small ellipse here because that would mean that I'm only seeing this opening from an extreme angle. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to draw this a little bit wider and a little bit more open so that I can tell that I can see more of this opening than I can of this opening back in the back. The other thing that I want you to pay attention to is the edge of the cylinder. When you look at this, this actually creates a lip to that surface. If you just go in and you go, okay, here's my line and here's my opening, you're not creating that three-dimensional form. You want to show that there is a flat edge to this opening that comes in like so, and you want this to stay as consistent all the way around. Doing these initial drawing lines, use your 2H pencil, use a B pencil, don't go super dark because if you mess up, you want to be able to go in and erase it. Now this comes in, I don't see anything over on this side. Once I get my basic shapes drawn in, now I'm going to look at, okay, here's where the table comes out, here's where the table comes out. That means my table, my back edge of this table line is going to come across like this. Now I've got the basic line drawing of this still life marked in. Your next stage is now to go in and look at this and to start thinking, not necessarily drawing negative space, because all of this is now positive space. But if you start thinking, okay, just like negative space, I'm looking for shapes. I'm looking for shapes of the shadows. Now you're going to go in and you're going to start saying, all right, where am I seeing the shadows coming in off of this piece? So I've got a little bit of a cast shadow that comes out. Don't worry about these ripples, the ripples in the cloth. Just pretend like the table is perfectly flat. So I've got a cast shadow that comes out and is a little bit rounded here. This is going to come out like so, and it's a little rounded. I'm just going in and mapping out where all of my dark shadows come across. So this intersects right about here on my on the main cylinder, so that would be at about right here. That I've got a corner shadow that comes up and intersects with this laying down cylinder. I've got the shape of this shadow that comes across like this. So you're just literally just looking at shapes. What do these shapes end up looking like? I've got a highlight back in here. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, all right, this is all going to be white like this. I've got this shadow that comes down off of the side to about halfway down the center of this cylinder. It's super dark up here, and then it gets lighter the further down I go. This dark shadow is all the way over on this side. This is my reflected light that comes in, but right now I'm just going in and I'm just focusing on my darkest areas. I've got a dark shadow on the inside of the cylinder up like this, with a little bit of a highlight like this. So all you're doing at this stage, once you get your line drawing down, is you're just coming in and you're marking out where your shadows on this particular view is going to be. Once you've got all of your shadows marked in, then you're going to jump in with your 4B or your 6B pencil, and then you're going to come in and you're going to start using your circular shading and your gradient values to come in and start laying in your darkest tones first. One of the things that I'm grading you on this project is absolutely your use of a full range of values. That means any place on your still life that you're looking at that has that black area, you want to go in and you want to shade it in super black. Any place that you look and you see a nice smooth gradient value, you want to use that circular shading and that control to get that super subtle shade from this dark gray down to, from black to a dark gray down to your medium gray to white. Really pay attention to that sense of contrast and how all of the values are lining up on the still life that you have in front of you. For this project, in your sketchbook, you're going to draw this and draw it large, guys. Don't, like if this is your sketchbook page, oh man, if this is your sketchbook page, don't give me a, here's my cylinder number 1, here's my little cylinder on the side, here's my table, and I'm just going to do it like this. Draw big, because the larger you draw this, the easier it's going to be for you. The larger you draw this, the less negative space you're going to have to go in and shade in to the background. And really, getting fine details, going in and getting these fine details with gradient value, it's so much easier to do this larger than it is smaller. Your job, you're going to be working on this particular drawing through today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. Thursday when you come in, another still life is going to be set up. Thursday when you come in, the next, this project will be due and you'll be starting the next one. So you've only got 2.5 class periods to get this whole thing down, which if you're using your time wisely, should be more than enough. Any questions on this?